I don't have time for an intro. Your guitars sound like trash. I'm Brandon with Megatonic Audio. Let's fix it. If you're sick of the guitar sounds in your final mix or final master just sounding subpar, not exactly what you were anticipating, not carrying the weight that you thought they would, let's get into a few reasons as to why that may be. And most of it actually starts in the recording stage, so we'll be going through a lot of that. And it's crucial that you take all of these things into consideration all together at the same time. They may seem like small details, but added up, it makes all the difference in the world. Just like, let's say, in motorsports at the top level, such as MotoGP, Formula One, just the bike alone, just the car alone, in either sport, the teams pay attention in excruciating detail to every detail of every part of the machine that they're trying to win with. Because at a certain level, every 0.01% matters. Especially when you start looking at the timing sheets and at the finishes of each race. You'll see the riders and drivers only separated by tenths at the finish line. Every 0.01% of performance matters. And it's the same in music, especially in recording and mixing. So you're going to have to take that level of attention to detail into your guitar recordings. And once you implement everything I'm about to say, your guitars will sound infinitely better. Trust me, guaranteed. So let's just jump right in. The first thing you need to be thinking about is your intonation. Yes, I know you know to keep your guitar in tune, and I know that you know what intonation is, your setup of your guitar or your bass even. I know you know what that means, and I know you know to keep that in check, but the reality is that a lot of these things that I'm about to tell you, especially your intonation on your guitar, people brush off in laziness, carelessness, or just forgetting about it. Just forgetting when the last time you checked on that was. You got to make sure your intonation of the guitar itself is good so that when you tune it and play it up and down the neck, no matter where you play it, it's going to sound in tune. Now, another thing that you need to think about with this intonation and tuning aspect is remembering to tune between takes, or at least check it. Again, it's another thing you know to do, but you gotta make yourself do it every time. Otherwise, you'll be like, oh, it's in tune, I can hear it, it's fine. But every time you let it slip a little bit, like I said, that 0.01% of not quite in tune will add up in your playing over the next take, and then the next one, and the next one. And while it is a small variation in your takes and a small intonation issue, it adds up with other issues that I'll get to later that make the difference between guitars in a song that sound like, man, I played everything right, but it's just something's not quite... It's not the best it could be, even for the part that it is. It'll make you feel like that when you're listening to the end track. If you don't implement all these little things, you won't be able to pinpoint what it is. It's because these are granular details, but they matter at the top level. You want your songs to sound like they're at the top level, you got to do this. Now, when you make sure your guitar is in tune between takes, that's fine and good if it's looking great on the tuner when you play each string, but it can be different while you actually play it. And a lot of people don't realize that even when your guitar open is perfectly in tune, as soon as you start playing it, it's gonna change a tiny bit, but it'll be a noticeable tiny bit. It's not gonna jump out at you. You have to train your ears to listen for it, but it'll ever so slightly get out of tune because your fingers heat up the strings. It changes the temperature of the strings that you're playing, and that loosens them up. Now, like I said, it's a very tiny amount, and it's not gonna just jump out at you. You gotta listen for it. So one tip is to compensate for that. Know how much you're gonna be playing on the strings and compensate with your tuning. And another way to mitigate that, besides just compensating with the tuning, because that can be pretty tricky and really granular to get right, to make sure you're not pressing too hard on your frets. I know most of you know not to do that because that obviously brings stuff out of tune. You're starting to pull everything a little sharp, but it's something you need to think about while you're playing and get good at thinking about it while you're playing, because I bet you might be letting that slip a little more than you think you are in some of your recordings. So just something to think about there. And not everybody agrees on that, about tuning and compensating like that and trying to make it perfectly in tune. You know, there are some people that like the slight variations, very slight variations in tuning, especially when they're layering guitars. But typically, you don't do that. You want it to be as in tune as possible, and some of the ways to do that are what I just said. And real quick, here's a little bonus tip on a way to make sure your guitar gets the least amount out of tune as possible as you play it. It actually has to do with the way you string your guitar and the way you're wrapping the string around the tuning pegs. You want to do it tight. You don't want anything to overlap or cross, you know. You want everything to be in line, stacked, and you want them stacked and touching. So like no more than 3 wraps of a coil like this on the lower wound strings. And you can do a little more, I guess, on the top strings, but you want that tension as you pull the slack out. After you put on the strings, you get it up to tune, you pull the slack out to get it to go flat, and then you tune it back up little by little, keep pulling the slack out. The more you do that, the more it's going to stay in tune. Even when you're doing a bunch of bends and you're playing, once you get it to where it stays in tune after pulling the slack out, it's going to stay in tune for a good while. You'll be surprised, especially on stiffer stuff and acoustic stuff. Anyways, the next thing you need to think about is your microphones. A big part of your tone, regardless of the preamp the mic's plugged into, is the microphone. Now, yes, preamps do make a difference, and they're another small difference, but the microphone is actually a big difference. And there's 2 things you need to think about: what mic you're going to use and where you're going to place it. So what mics are you going to use? Are you going to use a 57 like everybody else in the world? Or are you going to do something a little different? And in my opinion, I love using this mic more than a 57 a lot of the time. A 421. You should try that. Try using a 421. You don't have to use the standard SM57. In fact, you don't even have to use one mic. A really cool trick into bolstering your guitar tone no matter what you're recording is using 2 mics. But what I see a lot of people do is using 2 mics that are very similar. And you don't want to do that. You want 2 mics that complement each other and fill each other's voids. For instance, a good way to record your guitar is with 2 mics on the amp, one being a 57 or a 421, like I said, and then another one, instead of being a dynamic mic, make it a ribbon, which has a different frequency response. That way, when you sum those 2 together, they complement each other as a mono signal, and you know, blend each one to taste, and that changes the tone of the guitar for sure by a large amount. But they blend together easier in mono when you do something like that. In fact, one of the ribbons I like to use that I don't see a whole lot of people using, I see a lot of people using the Royer 121, but I think, if I'm honest, I think they're overrated. They're more expensive than their sound warrants, in my opinion, but they're everywhere. Everybody uses Royer 121s on their guitars, but I think it's kind of because everybody's doing it, so I should do it too, kind of a thing. But there are alternatives that sound different, and it'll sound great next to a SM57 or a 421. One of them is the SE Voodoo mics. This is the VR2. This is an active ribbon, and it can take a lot. This sounds great by itself on guitars, but especially when you're double micing a guitar amp, doing a ribbon like this with some other mic, like I said, a dynamic mic with a ribbon. It's a good combination. Some's great in mono, and when you spread it out, it's kind of got a faux stereo trick to it. And since they complement each other in mono, they're not going to cancel out when you're listening on a Bluetooth speaker or something like that to your mix, when you're checking what it sounds like in mono. By the way, comment below if you've got any other microphone combinations that you really like. Let me know what they are. Let me know what you like on your guitar amps. Or also let me know if you've tried the VR2s. I haven't tried the VR1s. I'd like to hear anybody who has. Let me know how they are. I think that's just the passive ribbon. Now, other than the mics you're going to use, where are you going to place those mics? So a lot of people, especially when you're just doing one mic, a lot of people put a 57 straight on axis right on the spider of the speaker, right dead in the center. To me, that's way too bright. And the more you move the microphone, if you get your flashlight and look in the cabinet for where the speaker is. If you start moving it out more towards the surround, the closer you get towards the surround and the further you get from the spider, the darker the sound gets. And here's the thing. It might sound cool by itself, maybe, if you like it really bright while you're listening in solo or when you're checking how it was recorded in the control room. But a lot of the times in the mix, you don't need how bright that's going to be. Especially if anybody's singing, you're going to, a lot of the times, cut out a little bit of that. So you don't need it anyways. The magic isn't there in the way top end. And a lot of the times, putting it right on the spider can make it bite too hard. Now, I've seen a lot of people put it right on the edge of the spider to where the edge of the spider right here is dividing the center of the capsule of whatever mic they've chosen to put there, usually a 57. And that's pretty standard to do it that way. But I really like to move it 30% out. So only a third of the way to the surround from the spider. That's usually the sweet spot for me. And obviously I put the second mic as close to that as humanly possible. To me, that spot sounds the best all around for any genre and any type of electric guitar I'm recording. That's always where I start. Then after you've figured out your mic placement and what mics you're going to use, you got to think about guitar stacking, especially rhythm guitars. So for instance, are you going to double the part, have one on the left and one on the right? Are you going to quad stack, 2 on the left and 2 on the right of the same part? And are you going to play the same part in the same voicing for each stack? Or are you going to have a higher voicing and a lower voicing, depending on how you're playing the chords on what part of the neck and what register, and then blending them all together? Now that's all preference. It's all preference with the arrangement you're doing. But you need to decide those things. And when you do, a lot of people will do things like quad stacking or stacking 6 guitars. But here's the thing. Stacking is really good, and you can get a good wall of sound doing that, and it'll for sure be a wall right in your face. But sometimes you can do too much and it can start to be too flat and start to lose the inspiration a little bit. So you don't want to do too much. So an alternate way of getting multiple guitar sounds, so stacking but not doing it too much and having a differentiated sound between your speakers, between your left and right, and still complement each other in mono, is recording the same part, even if it's the same exact part, or if you're doing different voices, it doesn't matter. But even if you're doing the same exact part and you're stacking it 4 times, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, or whatever, if you want to minimize that and get more of a differentiated sound between speakers, use either different amps for the different parts, or, and I would say do this anyway, always do this, is change what pickup you're playing each take on. You want a little bit of variation. You don't want it to sound exactly the same, because otherwise it could sound too flat. Changing the pickup helps between the 2 takes, but also if you have some sort of a splitter you can plug into before the amp, you can go out into 2 different amps, and I mean different amps, not 2 of the same kind of amps. Or some people record just different speakers on their same amp if they have multiple speakers, but that's not going to differentiate the sound of the different signals as much as playing in 2 different amps. That way you can get a lot of different sound by doing less. In that case, less is more. And the last thing I'll say in this video about getting a good recorded sound of your guitars so that the end product of the guitars sound amazing in the final mix, don't be afraid to dime your amp when you're recording it. When you make the amp work, when you make the speaker move, you make those tubes, you make those transformers work, it's gonna sound different than if you level matched the exact same part at a low to mid volume in the amp. And not every time, but a lot of the time, it sounds way cooler when you do dime it. And like I said, make sure you're putting all these things together that I just told you about and actively thinking about them while you're recording so that your mix will already sound good just from the recordings themselves. You'll barely have to do much to them in the mix, and I guarantee you your guitars will sound much better in the final product. And if you're wanting any help and wanting to collaborate with somebody to help make your final product sound amazing, there's a link in the description to work with me. Take a look at it and see if it makes sense for your project. And as always, I want to thank every single one of you for watching this video and others. If you like it, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, comment below. All of that stuff helps me get to more people like you about topics like this. I'm trying to grow this channel, and those things greatly help me get into the algorithm to be able to do so. And it helps me, and it's completely free to you. So anyways, thank you guys for watching and listening, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.